You're watching Grassroots TV, America's first community television station.
Thank you, Nicole, for that very generous introduction. Gosh, it makes me like me even more. And I just do want to point out, all those awards she was mentioning, I was always a finalist. I have yet to actually win anything. But anyways, thank you very much for inviting me to this lovely, lovely neck of the woods. It's my first time ever in Colorado. And thank you for making it snow today, because it was really, I appreciate that. Well, my name is Firoozeh Dumas. And I came to this country in 1972 from Abadan, Iran. My father was an engineer with the National Iranian Oil Company. And in 1972, he was given a 2-year assignment to come to America to help an American firm build an oil refinery in Iran. Now, Abadan, my hometown, is a desert, and it is filled with oil refineries. So a lot of my American friends, they say that when they smell oatmeal cookies or nutmeg, it reminds them of their childhoods. For me, it's gasoline. So all of a sudden, in 1972, here we are in Whittier, California, which some of you may know is the hometown of which president? Richard Nixon, who happened to be president at the time. So we thought we had truly landed in like the vortex of the United States. And my name at the time was Firoozeh Jazairi. So that's Firoozehjazayeri. So you could definitely tell that we were from somewhere else. And people were always asking us where we're from. So we'd say Iran. And they'd say, where is that? And we'd say, well, it's right between Iraq and Afghanistan. And they'd say, where is that? And we'd say, well, you know where the Caspian Sea is, where that really famous caviar comes from? We're to the south. And they'd say, what's caviar? Okay, this was not Aspen, okay? Whittier, not Aspen. People did not know what caviar was. And, you know, that whole fish egg conversation is always a dead end. So it just got to the point where we'd say, you know where Russia and Japan are? We're in the neighborhood. And one time we had this elderly neighbor, and she came over and she said, I just have to tell you people, I love your cats. And we said, we don't have any cats. And she said, no, the cats in your country. And we said, well, the cats in our country are just like the cats in your country. And she said, no, they're not. And so she went home and she came back with this book, and she showed us a picture of this beautiful long-haired creature, which we had never seen in our entire lives. And she said, it's a Persian cat. I think it's like Russian salad dressing. So from then on, whenever we would introduce ourselves, we'd say, we're from Iran, where Persian cats come from. And I'm telling you, it really helped our popularity a lot. When I came to America, I didn't speak any English. And my father decided that my mother, who did not speak a word of English, would go to school with me to help me. And I remember thinking, 2 people not speaking English, how is this better than 1? But I had no vote in the matter, so off to school I went with my mother. Now, you have to imagine this. I was not only the new kid in town, I was the new kid who was starting school 6 weeks after everybody else. I was the new kid who didn't speak English. And I was the new kid at school with her mother. So everywhere we went that day, everybody just stared at us. And so at the end of the day, I told my parents, I said, listen, only one of us gets to go to school here. And thankfully, it was me. And I had this fabulous second-grade teacher, Mrs. Bonnie Sandberg. I still keep in touch with Mrs. Sandberg. Although now whenever we talk, she says, call me Bonnie. I said, I can't, Mrs. Sandberg. And she had prepared her students ahead of time. She had told them there's a new student coming, she doesn't speak the language, and you guys have to be nice to her, and you have to include her in everything, and you have to be patient with her. And you know, it's amazing the difference that one good teacher can make in your lifetime. And the students did what Mrs. Sandberg told them to do. Of course, I tried to ingratiate myself with my new American classmates. I used to write their names on the board in Persian. And in Persian, we write from right to left, so it's terribly impressive. And all the kids would say, ooh, you write backwards. And I used to say, no, you write backwards. And during recess, when Mrs. Sandberg was not around, the boys would pester me, and they would say, teach us some bad words in your language. And I'd always say, no, I'll teach you how to say hello or goodbye or how are you. And they'd say, no, bad words. We want to learn some bad words. So finally one day I'd had enough, and I said, okay, fine. I'm going to teach you something, but it is so bad. You've got to promise never to repeat it. And they said, we promise. I said, okay. Man kharam, never repeat that. And of course, from that day on, they ran around saying, man kharam, man kharam, man kharam, which means I'm an idiot. Now, one day, Mrs. Sandberg called our house. This is the kind of teacher she was. She called my father, and she said, Mr. Jazzieri, I have noticed that Firoozeh likes to read. You need to take her to the public library. Now, a lot of authors will say, oh, I grew up in a home surrounded by books. Everywhere I looked, books, words. Well, not at all my house. In fact, the only books we had were my father's engineering textbooks. And I don't know if you've ever looked at an engineering textbook, but it's not something that encourages you to read. So, and yes, we do have libraries in Iran, but I had never been to one. My family is they're not really into books, except mine. So anyways, so my father says to my brother Farshid, who is 7 years older than I am, he says, Farshid, take Firoozeh to the library. So I grab my coin purse, and my brother and I start walking, and he says to me, we're going to the library, and a library is a place where they let you borrow books. And I thought, oh, he's such an idiot, because I went shopping all the time with my mom, and I knew you couldn't borrow anything. I mean, it's called shoplifting. You have to pay for everything. So we get to the library, and I go into this room, and I have never in my life seen so many children's books in one place. So I went and I found the smallest book, because I figured I could afford it. So then I went to the lady at the counter, and she made us fill out this sheet of paper with our name and our address, and I thought, what a complicated transaction. And then she gave me a card, and she said, bring the book back in 2 weeks. And I thought, holy moly, whoever thought of this? And, people always ask me, about flying carpets. I'll tell you, flying carpets, library cards. That's what that is. And the Whittier Public Library allowed you to check out 8 books at a time. And I didn't know any authors. I didn't know any American books. And so I came up with a system. So what I did was I checked out the top 8 books nearest the wall on the shelf, and then I read them and I returned them, and then I checked out the next 8. And then I read those, and then I checked out the next 8. And so I just snaked my way down the bookshelves. And one of my biggest regrets when we had to return to Iran 2 years later was I had not finished reading all the books at the Whittier Public Library. But it was interesting, a couple years ago, they actually invited me to do a fundraiser for them. So I felt things had come full circle. So this friend of mine said, listen, I have a friend who's an agent, and I'm gonna introduce you guys. And now, when you're from my part of the world, we are deep believers in destiny, qismat. So I thought, wow, my destiny is very clear right now. So I gave the 70 pages to this agent, and a week later, she called me in her office, and she said, I'm gonna have to say no. Now, this was not part of my destiny. So I said, really? What do you mean? Like, why don't you want them? And she said, well, because in America, when people read about the Middle East, what they really want to hear about is the struggle and the oppression. And I'm just not getting that in your stories. And I said, well, just so you know, not every Middle Eastern woman is oppressed. And she said, yeah, but in America, Middle East and humor doesn't go together, really. I need oppression. So, and I was in such a good mood going to her office that I had ridden my bike. And on the way back, I was like the Wicked Witch of the West. I was like, oh, yeah. So anyways, I had another friend who also knew an agent. And so I sent him my stories, and he also rejected them. And then this other friend said that she knows this very, very famous agent in New York who probably vacations in Aspen. I don't know. And she, she's this very famous agent who represents all these really famous writers, and she's married to this famous writer, and they're like this literary Uber couple. And she said, listen, I know this woman, and I'm going to send her your stories. So, of course, being the optimist that I am, I came home and I told my husband, I said, well, I think I know why those first 2 agents rejected me. I was meant to have the big agent in New York. And because I'm in California and she's in New York, I was getting up at 5 o'clock every day. In case you want to call me early, I wanted to sound perky and fascinating. So, and I told my kids at the time, my kids were 5 and 8, and I said, you are not allowed to answer the phone anymore. Because I was afraid my 5-year-old would pick up the phone and be like, Mary had a little lamb. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and 3 weeks went by, and I thought, well, it was 70 double-spaced pages with my name and number on every page. And I thought, I guess she's not interested. So I didn't know what to do, and I thought, all right, plan B. So my plan B, I went to Kinko's Copy Center, and I made 15 copies of my 70 pages, and then I put a color photo of Mrs. Sandberg on the cover, because I thought, she's going to bring me good luck. And I decided that I was always going to have a set of stories with me, and that eventually the universe would place the right person in my path, because I live in Northern California, probably tell. So, but the problem was, I realized I don't even know anybody, because I'd been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years. So the only grown-ups I knew were parents that I carpooled with in my kids' schools, and parents I'd volunteered with in my kids' classrooms, and parents on the lice check committee, which I was a part of. So, lice. Shepish, as we say. Okay. So, I called my friends, and I said, listen, from now on, whenever you guys are going to any of those like meetings that you go to and all those organizations you belong to, I'm available. And so I started going to all these meetings, and truth be told, I had no interest whatsoever in the meetings. But when it was time to mingle, that's when I would pop up and say, hi, what line of work are you in? And I live in Silicon Valley, so I met engineer after engineer after engineer after engineer after lawyer. So I realized I was just living in the wrong place for anything having to do with publishing. So I had to really lower my standards. And like one time I was at a party, and there was a lady wearing this orange and green outfit with this hat, and I thought, wow, I'm getting such an artistic vibe from her. So I gave her a copy. And then one time I was in the bathroom at the Four Seasons in San Francisco, and who comes out of a stall? Gloria Steinem. She got a copy. So, I mean, I let her wash her hands first. I mean, I wasn't like scary aggressive, but just enthusiastic. So anyways, I pass out all of my copies, my 15 copies, and the only good thing that happened was that we have 2 NPR stations where we live. There's a really big one, and then there's one with like 12 listeners. And the 12 listener one asked me if I would read some of my stories on air, which I did. And they said that, and whenever they air my stories, people call in and they say, wow, a humorous Middle Easterner. Thought that was an oxymoron. So I didn't know what to do. I mean, I had my plan B had expired, and I had no plan C, so I decided I was just going to be in a bad mood. So every day when I'd be dropping my kids off at school, moms would say, hi, how are you? And I'd say, oh, not good. You know, I'm trying to get published, and I've just like gotten rejected. And then I look, and they were gone. Apparently, when people say, how are you in the morning, they don't really want to hear the whole thing. Bless you. So anyways, I'm dropping my kids off one day at school, and there's this new mom, and she said, oh, I've heard you've written some funny stories. Can I read them? And I kind of looked her up and down, and I thought, I don't know. She doesn't look like she can really do anything. So, okay, you've all done that, people, okay? So don't act like I'm the only one who has judged a person by how they look. So I just didn't get a real, like, literary feel from her. So, but she was really persistent. And so every day she kept asking me. So finally, I one day just gave her a set of the stories. And the next day, I'm dropping my kids off at school, and she said, oh, my goodness, I was reading your stories in bed last night, and I was laughing so hard I woke up Bob, who's her husband. And she said, I just sent your stories to my cousin Cassie in L.A. And I thought, Cassie in L.A., that sounds like an agent. And I said, is your cousin Cassie in L.A. an agent? And she said, no. So 2 months goes by, and, you know, nothing has happened. I haven't heard from anyone. I was getting really depressed, and I thought, okay, I need to cheer myself up. And for me, that means going out to lunch. And I'm Iranian, so my favorite food is sushi. So I went to... which, by the way, I will not eat in a landlocked state. That's another story. But anyways, so anyways, I go to my ATM to get money, to get my sushi, cheer myself up, And I get to the ATM, and there is a stack of $20 bills right there at the ATM. And I thought, So I counted the money. It was $300. And then I went into the bank, and there was a really long line. And so I just went up to one of the tellers without waiting in line. Everybody was giving me the evil eye. And I said, excuse me, I need to talk to a manager. And the teller said, well, we are very busy. You need to call, leave a message, and we'll get back to you at the earliest convenience. And I said, well, I just found some money outside your bank. And she said, hold on. You guys might want to remember that line. So anyway, so 10 seconds later, the manager shows up. And so I hand in this $300, and she takes down my name and my phone number. And then I went back to the ATM and got $20 out of my own account. I also checked all the other ATMs, just in case. I could have been on a roll. So then I got my sushi, and I go home, and there is a message on my answering machine from an agent who was dying to work with me. And so it turns out this mom at my kid's school, who I'd completely underestimated and judged her unfairly by her clothing, she had given my stories to her cousin Cassie, who's not an agent, but then cousin Cassie finally read them, and she gave them to her friend Bonnie, who actually was an agent, and it was Bonnie who left me a message. So I called her right back, and I said, I am so glad I turned in this $300. And she said, what? And I said, karma. And she said, what? And I said, what goes around comes around. And so I spent like 20 minutes explaining to her. She still doesn't get it. But she lives in LA, okay? So how many places have I insulted so far? Let's see. So anyways, the next day I got a phone call from the bank manager, and she said that at the end of the day, this gentleman walked in the bank and said, you are not going to believe this. I swear this is the truth. I withdrew $300, and I forgot the money. And the bank manager said, I told him, you're not going to believe this, but somebody turned it in. So she said, can you please come back, because he left you a letter? And I said, sure. So I go back to the bank. Mind you, I am now a completely new woman. I now have an agent. So I get the letter, and it's obviously, it was a very elderly gentleman, because he had very shaky writing. And he gave me $50, and he said, go buy yourself a gift. So I went and had sushi. So a couple years ago, my brother called me and said that one of his co-workers was related to one of the hostages. And in our family, when we say hostages, it's always referring to the 52 that were held in Iran. And I said, really, which one? And he told me, and I'll tell you, when the hostages were being held in Iran for 444 days, my family and I watched that every single night. And some of you may remember, every night the news started with day 124, day 219, and it was just so horrific. Even if I say it now, I still get goosebumps. And it just went on and on and on. And there were 52, I think that's Oprah. Anyways, tell her I'm available if that's Oprah. But anyways, there were 52 hostages. Does Oprah come to Aspen? Yes? Is she here this week? No. Anyways, so out of these 52, I digress. There were 52 hostages, and 2 of them were women. And during both Christmases, they were both shown on TV. And during the second Christmas, one of them turns to the camera with amazing confidence and says, Mom, by the way, my weight loss is intentional. And does anyone remember this? And I just remember thinking, wow, I'm so impressed by this woman. I mean, first of all, she had such composure. And I'm thinking, what a practical woman. She's being held hostage, so she's like going to lose weight. I mean, I just thought, I like her. I just liked her. So it turns out that when my brother mentioned that, one of his coworkers was related to one of the hostages, it was that woman. And so I said, oh my gosh, I have got to get her email. So I got her email, and then I hesitated. I thought, what if she never wants to hear from another Iranian as long as she lives? Which I certainly would not blame her. But then I thought, okay, well, it's just an email, and I'll offer her a free book. So anyways, that should negate her experience of being a hostage. So anyways, I just wrote her an email, and I told her how much I remembered, those days, and how sorry I was that this is what she experienced in Iran. And she wrote me back a very nice email, and she said that she absolutely did not hold any resentment whatsoever, and that she had so many fond memories from her pre-hostage days in Iran. And anyways, we ended up exchanging books. She's also written a book. Her name is Catherine Kobe. And so we exchanged emails for about a year and a half. And finally, I said, you know what, Catherine, we really need to meet. And I was giving a lecture in Wisconsin, and she lives in Iowa. So she came to Wisconsin, and she said to me, have you been to Iowa, and do you want to go on a car trip together? I said, yeah, let's do it. So I thought, this is great. We're going to just talk and talk and talk. So I called all the media outlets, because I thought, I can see the headlines. The hostage and the humorist. So I called all of them, and I said, hey, you guys might be interested in covering this story. And none of them were interested. None. And then afterwards, when I was talking to my father one day, and I said, I'm just so disappointed. No media outlets were interested. And this woman has so much to say, so much wisdom. And I said, nobody's interested. And my dad said, yeah, but if you'd taken her hostage, then you would have been on the news. So.